Yeah, we'll talk about those here in a little bit. Genesis chapter 19. If you remember, we started going through Genesis 19 last week, and we covered quite a bit of the material. And we're gonna back up just a little bit to verse 16, and then we'll see how far we get, and we'll go from there. So, Genesis chapter 19, verse 16. We'll start there. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand and upon the hand of his wife and upon the hand of his two daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, Oh, not so, my Lord. Behold, now thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me, and I die. Behold, now the city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. Father, we thank you once again for the time that we have to study the Word. We're thankful that we have it, that we can study it, that we can read it, we can learn from this information. And as we go through here, what we find out is these aren't just stories, but these are people's lives that lived. They're just recorded for us that we might be able to learn from them, that we can learn what not to do and what to do, just based on what your Word says. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Now, as we were getting down through this passage last week, we noticed a few things, right? Just a few, and don't forget my timer there. We got down a little bit through this passage, and so then what we found out is you've got these two men with the angels. They go to Sodom, and we find out what's taking place in Sodom, and what they end up doing is those two angels, as we read there in verse 16, takes Lot's hand, the hand of his wife, and the two daughters, and sets them out without the city, right? And then what they're saying is, we want you to go into the mountain, and Lot's response is no, right? And the reason why he gives that response is in verse 19, Behold, now thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life, and I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. So he says, here's why I don't think it's a good reason for me to go into the mountain. And then he says, Yeah, you kind of look at that and like, come on, Lot. I mean, but what happens is he says, well, I don't want to go into the city because if I go into the mountain, because if I do, some evil might take me and I'm going to die. And so he says, well, what about this city near us? Can I go there? And what does the angel say? All right, we're going to take you there. Now, down in verse 22, notice, Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou hast come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, this is one of those things that everybody brings up, Lot's wife and all that. And there's some other things that we'll be able to get to with this. But why is it that she became a pillar of salt? Well, what did she do? She looked back. Were they told not to look back? Right? So if you go back up, when we see in verse 21, it says, And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, saying, We'll let you go to this other city, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till till thou be come hither. Therefore the name of the city was Zoar. And haste thee, escape thither. I cannot do anything till thou become thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. Prior to that, he was told what? Verse 17, escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. What happens there is, what does faith do with that verse 17? Doesn't look back. Now, that's what takes place, and what do we find out about Lot? She gets back, she looks back from behind, and what happens is she becomes a pillar of salt. Because she does the opposite of what he said to do in verse 17, right? By faith, what should she have done? Not looked back, right? And so then we keep on going in verse 27. And Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. And he looked towards Sodom. Now, hold on a second. Notice there in verse 27, and Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. There was, you think about this. This is one of those things we've seen this before. Back up. Well, I don't want to do that. What do we get from that verse 27? Abraham has what? A place, right? Notice it says, and Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. There's a particular place where he goes and he stands before the Lord. He's got a particular place set aside for him to go and do just that. All right. Now, of course, what we've gone through is we looked at these things, and we talked about it the last time. Yeah, let's do this. Go back to Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Now, of course, this is dealing with Adam and Eve, but I want us to think about this. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, and Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof, and the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Now, one of the things we talked about, this issue of this offering that Cain and Abel bring, there's some things that we talked about that. Did Abel and Cain know that they were to bring an offering at some point? And when you see that, he says, and in the process of time it came to pass, right? So there's a particular time that they knew that they were supposed to do this. Notice it says that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. Did they know where to bring it? Was there a place where they were to bring this offering? Of course, the answer is yes. Did they know what they should bring? Yeah, right? And so when you take a look at this, they had access to this information that there is a particular time and a particular place and a particular thing that you're going to bring. And so then when we get over here to Abraham in chapter 19, one of the things that it's an interesting thing to me is chapter 19, verse 27, and Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. There's a particular place where he goes and he communes with the Father, right? And it's an interesting thing to me because I think it's one of those, does the place matter? Is there a particular place where we need to go right now today to be able to gain? And of course the answer is no. Did the nation of Israel eventually, are they going to have a particular place where they're going to go? There will be, right? There's a particular place where they're going to go and they're going to be able to stand before the Lord, if you will. And it's just, to me, it's an interesting thing because Abraham, he gets up in the morning and what's he do? He goes to that particular place, right? Verse 28, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. Now, if you remember, if you back up to chapter 18, notice in verse 17, this is when the men show up to Abraham to talk about the fact that you're going to have a child. Verse 17, and the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? And of course, we talked about what was one of the reasons that we might think about that is because does Abraham know where Lot is? Right? And one of the things that we talked about is when God tells him, what's Abraham's response? Well, if there's 50 people there, would you save it? If there's 40 people there and you're going down through there. So when you think about this, what is it that God remembered with Abraham is what? The conversation that they had back here that's recorded in Genesis chapter 18. Right? Because he was talking about, okay, I remember and it's not like God forgot. Right? He's bringing this up and he says, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send Lot out in the midst of the overthrow. When he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. And Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain. Now, what did we just find out just a few verses before this? What did Lot not want to do? Go to the mountain. Lot does what right here? Goes to the mountain. Didn't he already say, I don't need to go to the mountain because I think there might be something there and I'm probably going to die? And what's he turn around and do? Mark brought this up last week. What's he turn around and do? He makes the decision, well, I'm going to go to the mountain. Right? Notice. And Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain. Now, hold on for a second there and think about this. Go back. Go back to verse 19 and think about what's going on here. Chapter 19, verse 19, behold now, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life, and I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. Behold now, this city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, see, I have accepted thee concerning this thing. So the angel says to Lot, what? Okay, I'm going to let you stay here in Zoar. Right? In fact, he says, I want to name it Zoar. And he says, I'm going to let you stay here. So then, if you think about what's going on, Lot makes a really good decision, says, I don't want to go into the mountain because I think there's probably going to be a problem for me to get there when I get there and I'm going to die. And he says, can I go here? And the angel says, okay. Now, when we get over here, verse 30, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain. He's doing the exact opposite of what he said to the angel that he was going to do. Right? Did the angel okay him to stay in Zoar? Did the angel okay him to go into the mountain? Originally he said go to the mountain, but he says, okay, if this is what you want to do, okay, this is where you're going to go. There's where you're going to go and stay. And so then what's he do? He leaves. And what ends up happening? Notice. And his two daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his two daughters. So he takes his two daughters with him. They go up into the mountain. What's one thing that we notice that's missing here, obviously, is his wife, because what just happened to her, right? So it's just him and his two daughters. That's it. There's three people that's going up into this mountain. Now, verse 31, and the firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. So the firstborn daughter, her idea is what? Well, let's go and get our dad drunk, and let's preserve this seed. Well, mom's gone, so what do we need to do? Well, what do we know that's already happened to the sons and the other daughter and the son-in-laws? What's happened to them? They're probably gone up with that smoke, right? And so when we think about that, he had son, at least one. What happened to him, in order for them to say we need to preserve the seed, that means what happened to the son. He had to have perished in that particular, as I like how it says, in the midst of the overthrow. I just like the phrasing of that. But the firstborn daughter comes in and says, well, our father's old, there's not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. Now, of course, we've already dealt with some of these things prior to, and if you all remember the issue that we dealt with Noah, what did they do with Noah? Well, we remember what took place with Noah, right? Now in verse 33, and they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. Now, fairly clear what's taking place there, right? But what happens is, what takes place based off of that is verse 37, right? And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. The same is the father of Moabites unto this day. Now, when you take a look at the Moabites, some really interesting things that's taking place there, and we're going to get to that sometime soon. But when you go and take a look at where those families, their ancestors, well, I don't want to say ancestors, their lineage comes, the seed comes from that. There's some really interesting things there, and we're going to talk about that sometime soon. But notice it says, the same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Benami. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Now, again, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to take a look at some of these things. But notice the process of the thinking here, right? Go back to where do I want to go? Let's go back to 13, and just kind of think about these two situations here. We have Abraham and Lot, and of course, what we've talked about is, as you've gone through here, we see some things with Abraham and Lot, some of their question or some of their ideas and some of the decisions that they make are questionable at best, right? But what happens in chapter 13, just as a reminder, chapter 13, what happens, go back to verse 1. It says, And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold, and he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now, verse 5, And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of the Abram's cattle and the herdmen of the Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right, and if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Now, one of the things we talked about when we went back here in Genesis chapter 13 is They get to the point, there's way too much that both of them have, and the land's not able to sustain the both of them, and all the cattle and all the things that they've got. And so then they make this decision. Abraham says, I'm going to go whichever direction you don't go, right? And so then this is one of those things that we see. And what happened is Abram actually gave up his right to the first choice, gave it to Lot. Now, when we look at verse 10, this is just a series of bad judgment, if you will, based on, well, the way that Lot thinks, right? Notice in verse 10, and Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, we talked about this last week. What was the purpose of Lot choosing this particular land? Because it was well watered. He looked at it and said, man, that's a nice looking spot, right? And it's not that he was looking out and saying, man, I want to go be a part of what Sodom and Gomorrah is part of, but he's saying, that looks really beautiful, and I want to go and be a part of wherever that is. He says, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Now, when we take a look at Lot's the way that Lot made the decision, what was it based off of? Well, it was well watered, but also what? For himself, right? What else? Based off sight. Man, that looks good, so let me go there, right? So when you think about the reason that Lot's doing this, and again, Abraham, he made some mistakes when they go down to Egypt and all that stuff. But Lot, if you take a look at his thinking as we go through here, this one, what would be the purpose of him choosing this? He did what? He saw that it was well watered. Now, if you go back to Genesis chapter 3, in Genesis chapter 3, notice we see the same type of thing taking place back here in Genesis chapter 3, right? And it's interesting because what's brought up in Genesis 13 is that this place that Lot looks to is well watered, even as the garden of the Lord. And so then that should automatically make us think of, hopefully, the Garden of Eden, right? Well, back here in Genesis chapter 3, when we go through and we see that serpent shows up, tempts Eve, questions God's word, Eve subtracts from it, adds to it, waters it down, and then Satan finally just absolutely denies it. Notice in verse 5, Genesis chapter 3, verse 5, for God doth know, so this is the serpent, this is Satan speaking to Eve, saying, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof. Now he's talking about the fruit of the tree, of the particular tree that he's talking about. He says, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Verse 6, and when the woman, what? Saw that the tree was good for food. What is she basing her decision on? What she sees, right? Has God already told her, don't eat this fruit? So then what would faith do? Don't eat the fruit. I'm going to take you at your word, and I'm not going to eat the fruit. But what happens is when she saw that it was good for food, and that it was what? Pleasant to the what? To the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Now, when we see this, what is it that she does? She sees that the tree is good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes, and to be desired to make one wise. She took of the fruit thereof. So, how did she make her decision? Right. How did Adam make his decision? Huh? Mm-hmm. She saw it. Yeah. Well, no. So she says that she saw that the tree was good for food, right? So she saw that it was good for food. The thing that she saw is that's something that's good for food. Did God tell her not to eat it, though? And so she's saying, well, I see that there's something good there. And then she says, and that it was pleasant to the eyes. So it looked good. It looked good. There's good fruit there. That's got to be something good for me, right? And a tree to be desired to make one wise. She took of the fruit thereof and did eat. So she sees it, and she says, man, that looks good. I want to know. I want to be as God's knowing good and evil, so I want to partake of the fruit. So her decision making was based solely on what? What she saw. She sees this, and her reaction, her response is, that's good. I should get it. Why is God keeping it from me? And again, did they fall when they ate the fruit? The moment they made the decision to eat the fruit's when the sin took place, right? And again, we talk about these things all the time. When sin takes place, it's when the thought is, I'm going to do this. That's when sin takes place, not the actual act, right? So then what can we do? How do we prevent the act from taking place? Is we stop the thinking. Well, are we going to be able to stop all the thinking of the things that we want to? The answer is no. But can you change the way you think about things? We can, right? And that's the whole idea about this. So when she sees the tree is good for food, and then it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, before she took the fruit, she had already sinned, right? And so that's again, this thinking process. When we get over here to Lot, how is it that Lot makes this decision in Genesis chapter 13? He makes this decision by saying what? Look at how well watered that is. He says, and Lot lifted up his eyes. And now, if you drop down, verse 14, and the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, what's the Lord say to Abram? He says, lift up now thine eyes. Who is it that's making this decision by looking? Was Lot. Now, obviously we could say that Abraham's obviously going to have to go the opposite way because that's what he's promised to Lot. And by him doing that, he does exactly that. But here, God says to Abram, he says, lift up thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For how much of the land? All of it. He says, for all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. Now, does that include Sodom and Gomorrah? It does. So God says, all the land, you look north, south, east, and west. When you think about this, where is it that Lot goes? He says, verse 11, then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. When you go down to verse 14, the Lord says to Abram, says what? Look from the place where thou art northward and southward and what? Well, what's east of them at this particular time would have included Sodom and Gomorrah. And God's saying what? I've already given all this to you. This is going to be yours. This is going to be yours and your seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth. And he goes on down through there. Now, to me, those are really interesting things. Now, again, with this thinking process of Lot. Now, first of all, I guess we should have backed up. Earlier in chapter 12, God says to Abram, says, get out, get away from thy country, from thy kindred. And what's Lot do? Lot follows him. Well, that's bad mistake number one, right? And it's interesting because Abraham's usually the one that gets the brunt of that, but Lot's the one that made the bad decision. And so then when we get down here, Lot's put in this position to have to make a choice. Well, which place am I going to go? Because he followed Abram and he shouldn't have, right? And so then it's just an interesting thing. We see him choosing this based off of the site. Now, back over in chapter 19. Huh? Well, she should have known, yeah. I don't know if you'd be able to say that he got her killed.
Well, I mean, it says that they were told.
Yeah.
It's almost
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, no, you could see a connection there. Yeah.
But doesn't some of that responsibility have to go to Abraham?
On what?
Letting Lot follow him? I mean, he could have told Lot, look, you stay here,
Well, he could have,
that's what I'm saying.
but he did. Because we see he leaves, and he does exactly what he said, what he's told to do, and he just left. Could have possibly said, okay, Abram, you need to tell him you need to leave, but
Well, I mean, the same thing with Hagar.
yeah,
Lot made another choice he didn't have to make. He didn't have to take Hagar and have a child.
yeah,
He could have told Lot to stay home too.
yeah. No, and again, that's why I said, like, both of them, they had some bad mistakes, bad choices, absolutely.
Well, I'm just saying God didn't say anything to Lot. He only called Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, because he was only speaking to Abram at the time. Yeah, yeah, and that's why he didn't stop. That's why he didn't stop Lot, and that's why I think it's important once they get over to the point where it's time for them to separate. Now's the time, and when you go back there, that's the decision that Abram at that point says, okay, Lot, this is too much. We need to split up.
Sounds like once they split up, Lot kind of went off the rails too, as far as his decision. He's got all of his decisions, none of them seem to be good.
Yeah, I mean, none of his decisions seemed to be good, but this one got worse and worse, right? Or at least the consequences of them, and that's big. That's a big point too. Is you take a look at the consequences of the responses and the choices that they make. But here in chapter 19, again, Lot, he goes over to Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, we see him here at chapter 19, verse 1, and there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat at the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing those men, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. He's sitting over here at the gate of Sodom, and it's almost like he's just looking in, like he's enamored by that junk. It just seems that way. He's sitting at the gate, and he sees these two guys walk in, and he's just caught up with it. And then we see the only good thing is when the guys come in to the house, does Lot make a good decision there about trying to protect the two men? Because he knows how bad it is. So he does make maybe a decent, maybe? Huh? Not buying what?
I think it was for self-benefit.
What do you mean by self-benefit?
He put on that charade to make himself look better, I think.
How? How would that make him look better?
He couldn't protect us. He knew that. What was he going to do to all those night boys? Was he going to fight all of them off?
Well, no. But the fact that he put them in there and locked them in, that's why I was saying he at least made that decision. That would have been somewhat right.
He knew they were angels.
Yeah. Yeah.
He knew that
He knew that he was in the wrong being there.
No, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
and he knew those angels.
The fact that he was there. Yeah.
He knew those angels could defend themselves.
Yeah.
So it just seems like a charade.
Perhaps. Huh?
The worst part of it, yeah, they offered to stay outside.
Yeah.
They didn't need it. And they made it clear, we're going to stay outside all night. And he was like,
No, you need to come in. Yeah. I see what you're saying. But I mean, but again, it's still, he's trying to make a good decision, but of course the decision's not a good one, right? But it's kind of like, okay, maybe. Yeah, and then he makes that bad decision, which gets even worse, and he's just like, come on, Lot.
Now, when I was going through that whole thing, I saw a little attempt at self-righteousness,
It is.
because all of his decisions weren't honest.
No, they weren't. They weren't. But he's like trying to attempt, okay, I want to try and do something, right? But what do we know about his decision? It's not good, right?
I think this is a perfect example of the Bible is telling the accurate depiction of what happened,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also relaying the ignorance that transpired too. Like it's not hiding.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's the idea, because he's bringing up this idea, and he's look back at chapter 19, verse 3. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him and entered into his house, and he made them a feast and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. Before they laid down, the men of Sodom, even it goes on down through, or the men of the city, and it goes on down through there. He's attempting to do something. So I kind of see what you're saying, but he's trying to at least pretend like he's doing something right. So he's trying to make a good decision. And so then they come in, make a feast, and then bake unleavened bread. But of course, his decisions are still, he's still Lot, right? He's still making bad decisions from the very first time he starts following Abraham up until now.
I mean, this is the Old Testament. It's a series of judgments by mankind. I mean, Abram lies about his wife.
Mhm.
Lot tries to send his children out to be molested by men. It's continuous failure, and I think that's what
Yeah.
demonstrates the truthfulness of it, maybe, because nobody sort of comes up and says, I did this, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. So to your point there, I see what you're saying now. I was thinking you were saying something else. But yeah, I mean, because that's the idea, right? Is we can fix it. I'll take care of it and let me do it. And then that's what Lot's trying to do here. But what happens is he makes really bad decisions. Now, to me, it's one of those things when you look at verse 8 and he says, well, I have 2 daughters. And of course, we talked about that, and it's just like, come on, Lot. I mean,
Well, look at the daughters a few chapters later.
I know, and so then, but that's kind of the idea is, right? How is it that the daughters are going to make decisions is probably how they've been raised, and how they've been raised is based on Lot and his decisions, right? And so you kind of see these things as you go through, but I see the idea, the attempt at self-righteousness, and that's what it is, yeah.
Lot had to know that Sodom and Gomorrah was in, both of those cities were there when he chose that land. That could not have been.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, he knew they were there. Yeah, he knew they were there.
Once he got in.
Yeah, but again, he knows that's what it is. Yeah, and it's that idea of, and that's why I say, what better way to prevent yourself from falling into something is don't put yourself in a position to be making that decision, right? And of course, what's Lot do is he understands those things, and he picks a place that's well watered because he sees it and he says, okay, I'm going to do this, and he makes that decision based off of that. Here he says, well, he knows the 2 angels are there. He's like, well, come on in and I'll protect you, that type of thing. So he's pretending at least to kind of make a good decision, but then again, what do we find out about his decision? It's still not a good decision. But he's still working this way. Yeah.
I could be totally wrong, but when I read Genesis 13, I get that God is trying to tell us that Lot's decision wasn't singular. I mean, he states, yeah, the land's nice, but then immediately God proceeds to say that Sodom and Gomorrah had not been burned yet.
Mhm.
That statement by itself makes no sense, but that statement in context with the fact that Lot just made a decision to go eastward
Mhm.
makes it implies that he's aware there's that city there, and then he follows up 2 verses later saying that it's a super evil place to be.
Mhm.
So like, it's hard for me to read that following text and not assume that God's implying Lot knew that was what he was aiming toward as well, because if there's no reason to add that there unless
Well, I mean,
in Lot's thoughts.
the only difference is Genesis was written way after Sodom and Gomorrah had actually been destroyed. Right? Because Moses isn't even in existence yet, maybe. He's on down the road, and he's the one that writes this. So when Moses writes this, Sodom and Gomorrah's already been destroyed, but at that particular time. So I see what you're saying, but
He writes it 2 chapters later to let us know that of the whole Sodom and Gomorrah situation, or the Sodom thing with Lot. Like what? I don't know. To me, this is like a perfect example of how Richard Jordan's always like, if you're trying to find an answer in the Bible, look another place. And 13, he's like, Sodom and Gomorrah is still up, not burned to the ground.
Mhm.
And he's like, and it's a super wicked place, and Lot's going there. And then follows it up a couple chapters later with like, Lot's living right up, like you said previously. He's lusting for the town while not going into town.
Yeah.
Like he's staring at it. So it's like, I don't know. To me, this is a good example of the Bible backing up its own statements.
It is, and it is, and it is, and that's what I'm saying. Like, but Moses is writing this from the historical perspective, saying that Lot chose this place. It's not even been burnt down yet, but he chose this place. So I see what you're saying, but Moses is saying, Moses, when he's writing, well, the Holy Spirit writes this, he's saying Lot chose this based on the fact that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And then, of course, we find out about Sodom and Gomorrah 2 verses later, and then chapter 15, like I said, or by the time we get over to 19. But that idea is he chooses it. What does the verse tell us why he chose it? Because it was well watered everywhere. And Moses, from his future perspective, is writing about the past. He chose it, and it's not even destroyed yet. And that tells us Sodom and Gomorrah is coming up.
Yeah.
And so when we get to Sodom and Gomorrah, we already know something about it because of what's written in chapter 13.
I could see it being surely historical,
Yeah.
but I don't know that.
And it's possible.
Literally, the following sentence intentionally stating that Sodom and Gomorrah has not been destroyed.
Mhm.
Like, I almost feel like that's like a second clause as to why Lot would.
And he knew it was exceedingly wicked. The man that was exceedingly wicked.
I can see it going both ways.
Yeah.
I don't know, Lot made a consistently terrible decision.
All the time, yeah.
So, like, it just makes a lot of sense that this is just in line with what Lot did.
No, it is. It is. And that's why I'm saying, like, when we look at that, is it possible that it is? But we're told, and we're not told he chose it because he saw Sodom and Gomorrah was bad, right? But we do know that the place that he chose contains Sodom and Gomorrah, which is bad and it's not yet destroyed, right? So I see what you're saying, but,
Is that more of a thing for us to learn from? Just
well,
it looks good, and you know there's a lot of evil there if you support it. Maybe.
well, specifically for the nation of Israel as well, but yeah, we would look at it too and say, just because it looks good doesn't mean it is. I mean, he may have known how bad Sodom and Gomorrah is. We don't know. We're not told. That's why he chose it. We're told that he chose it because it was well watered everywhere. Yeah.
One correlation, if you go back to the garden,
Mm-hmm.
or back to Eve's decision,
Mhm.
she was given a warning.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it that he was given a
Lot. He's not dealing with Lot. He's dealing with Abraham, right? So he's speaking to Abraham. The problem is Lot's followed him and he shouldn't have. So
warning. So Lot had no warning, but Abraham did.
he might have, I don't know, but I'm saying when you look at this, the whole issue here is God is speaking to Abram, and Lot's following. He shouldn't have. And so could Lot have been warned? Perhaps, but my question is what if Abram chose that instead, knowing if he knew that it was that way? So that brings up a whole other thing. But he gives up that right to Lot to make that choice, and Lot makes the choice. Huh?
It really doesn't.
It doesn't. And so then we can. That's why I'm like, okay.
I kind of get on the wavelength that when Abraham knew Lot
When what?
behind, saw the two angels,
Mhm.
they were, makes a lot of bad decisions, so he had some knowledge.
Maybe like
Well, he sees what's going on there, and he says, and at least by that time we know that he knows that's not good. But he's sitting there watching, looking into the city, like, man, I want to go in that city.
Then would go, might as well go myself.
Yeah.
I say Lot made it easy for Abraham not to make another bad decision
Possibly.
because he took it.
And so the good decision that Abraham made was you chose first, right? you make the decision, because I know you're not the greatest at making decisions, right?
I just think when it said that he knew those people were exceedingly wicked and he still went, shows you that flesh like.
Well, it doesn't say that he knew they were.
It does say.
But in chapter 13, verse 12, and Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. It doesn't tell us exactly that Lot knew that they were. It just tells us that they were.
It kind of implies it though, if he pitched his tent towards it, maybe something that he,
Well, it's that idea if he's at the gate looking in, right?
right, is the fruit and,
Yeah.
Where did we come to the conclusion that he didn't live inside?
Well, so right here he pitched his tent toward Sodom, right? And in chapter 19, He's at the gate of Sodom.
Right, but it doesn't say he doesn't, and he's seeing them rose to meet them, so he's looking out as they're coming in. And then it says, turn into thy servant's house and tarry the night. I'm thinking he's living inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
He lives within the city gates.
Now he is, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like you see this, you see it. He pitches his tent towards Sodom to begin with. Here he's at the gates and he's got a place in Sodom. Yeah. And he's getting closer and closer to that, and to the point where he's there in it, right? And that's why the guys in Sodom come knocking at his door.
That's what I'm saying. They didn't come out the gates to find his house.
No.
They came out the suburbs. Now they,
No, and you see, I mean, his boys are there, and sons-in-laws are there. Yeah. But I would say because of that, that's where he is. Yeah. But again, with his decision making, Abraham messes up a lot. We understand that. Lot messes up a lot, right? The one maybe is where he says, I don't want to go to the mountain because I know there's probably going to be something there. Does he know? In fact, when you look at chapter 19, verse 19, he says, I cannot escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. Does he know something could be bad for him in the mountain?
Sounds more like he's just scared to death.
Perhaps.
That's what it sounds like.
Perhaps.
He gets afraid of death for reasons Zohar.
But then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go on in the mountain anyway. But the idea there is he's saying what? I cannot escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. So the idea is he knows, do we know based on that, does he know something in the mountain?
there's something.
There's something in the mountain that he knows I don't need to go there, but he ends up going there. Yeah.
Are you implying that his daughters have been whispering back and forth about their plot?
I wouldn't think so.
I didn't know what you meant, so I was confused.
No, it's just he knows something is out there in the mountain. That if he goes there, what's going to happen to him? I'm going to die.
James just told you we're getting ready to destroy it.
Yeah.
So he's more afraid of going to the mountain than he is whatever else.
Well, what's he say? He says, I cannot escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. He knows something in the mountain. He knows when I go there, I'm going to die.
It's almost like he's made so many bad decisions, he has to have faith.
It's possible. It's possible. I mean,
Zoar is a suburb or a small city around Sodom and
Mhm.
Gomorrah. It's a little town, means smallest, Zoar means smallest.
yeah.
So it could be that he's like, that's far, that's close. I'm lazy.
Well, the idea, no, but he says, if I go there, I'm going to die.
Right.
Right? So he knows there's something in the mountain that if I go there, I die.
But the next morning, he's in Zoar, he looks at Sodom and Gomorrah burning,
Mm-hmm.
and he decides, well,
I'm going to go to the
there
mountain.
for me no more, I'm going
I'm going to the mountain.
to the mountain.
Hang on a second. Yeah.
Why do you think he's worried about his soul living? Why does he say soul and not flesh? Like, is it implying that it's a death of his soul or a death of his flesh that he's scared of out in the mountains? Are they the same thing? Am I misinterpreting that? Like,
So in verse 20, he says, Behold, now this city is near to flee unto, and is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one, and my soul shall live.
he thinks his soul's going to live if he goes toward the city and not the mountains. I just think it's weird that he says soul and not flesh, body.
Yeah.
Soul.
Well, that tells us he knows something about his makeup, that his soul is who he is, right? That's when you think of the soul living or the soul dying. Of course, we'll talk about that in the morning session too. But when you talk about the soul living or the soul dying, he's dealing with eternity there, right?
That's what I view too. That's why
There's something. His flesh may die when he goes in the mountain,
I do like
but
the idea of Aaron saying he's scared of bears, but he's worried about his soul dying. So I don't know. That's why I thought you were implying like he knew his daughters were scheming because his soul would surely die there. But
I don't know if that is, because it's not until you get to verse 31 the firstborn says to the other daughter.
yeah,
So that's the first time that it's actually that we're told that this scheme is actually thought about, and it's interesting because it doesn't happen until they get to the mountain. It doesn't happen in Sodom. It doesn't happen in Zoar. Now, obviously, when they're leaving Zoar or they're leaving Sodom, and Lot's wife looks back, now they have no chance to have another son because the sons are now dead, and then that's when the daughters would do that. I don't think that they would have conceived that idea while they were in Sodom because the wife was still there, and the sons were still alive. So I don't know if I'd go with that, but I see what you're saying there.
So you got the, in Genesis 12, when Abraham goes to Egypt, and he tells his wife, or he tells Sarah, don't say you're my sister, and he says, so that my soul shall live.
Yeah.
But I don't think necessarily there it was, I mean, do you think that would be a term? I think sometimes it's, whenever it refers to souls, it's referring to an individual.
Could be the individual person, because that's who you are, right? You are your soul. Your soul is you. Yeah.
Someone says it's a properly breathing creature, an animal.
Yeah. I mean, it's who you are, but
Interchangeably.
yeah,
What we would think of as,
yeah, but that's who you are, Raymond.
1919, he refers to his life being city.
Yeah.
It seems more likely he's using them interchangeably.
Yeah.
Life and soul.
What it
Yeah.
sounds like is that whenever the children of Israel came out of Egypt and they went to the sea and they're like, did you bring us out here just to starve? Like, I think Lot's worried about going to the mountain because he's not gonna have food, he's not gonna have things to do, he's gonna die because he's not gonna have anything. He wants
Perhaps,
to
yeah.
be in the comfort of his house.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He does. He's not watched a YouTube video on how to live off the land yet. Hang on a second.
I take verse 19 to mean that he's scared that something's gonna get him on the way to the mountain. And then later, after the plane is destroyed, whatever he might have been afraid of isn't there anymore. So now he's scared to live in Zoar and he goes to the mountain. There's nothing to get him on the way. That's just the way I see it.
Well, I wouldn't see it as something like that at all. But I mean, that's
Either way, the bottom line is that he didn't have faith in what
yeah. He didn't have faith in what the angels did, and the angels say go live in Zoar, and he's like, all right, I'm going to go the other way.
enough to be able to provide for him.
Yeah.
Like he would,
Yeah, I was gonna go down another route, I lowered that here, 'cause I don't
Okay, you're fine.
He said it.
As long as we dig upwards.
You just showed mercy and you saved my life,
Yeah.
but now I'm afraid to go to the mountain.
Yeah.
I mean, what?
Again, that's the idea. He's not making decisions based off faith, right?
Yeah, I mean, they just saved him and he just admitted it,
Yeah.
and then he says, well, I'm afraid of you.
Yeah.
He shall stay.
Yeah, and it's that idea of being unstable. So what was your rabbit trail, just in
Well, my
case?
rabbit trail was he had some premonition of God's plot. But that isn't true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not something that we see in the verses, right?
No, we don't see this.
Again, because his wife is still alive. The daughters aren't looking saying, well, our dad's old and mom's dead, so we need to protect it, and the sons are dead, we need to protect his seed line. And so then they make this decision after they go up into the mountain. But there's something in the mountain. He knows something, but anyway, what's he do? He makes a bad decision again and goes up into the mountain.
The best part is he says, like, I'm scared to go to the mountain. I want to go to Zoar. And the angel's like, go to Zoar. And he's like, he gets there and he's like, I'm scared of Zoar. We gotta go to the mountain.
No, and that's the idea. Is like he's waffling. Like Delilah and I watched this thing on YouTube. These the guys that do yard work in England. And they're like, stop waffling and let's get going type thing. He's waffling, right? Well, I want to go do this. All right, go do that. No, I want to do this now. We'll go do that. He doesn't know what he wants to do, and the whole idea is his entire life is based on what? Seeing stuff, right? Every decision he makes is based on seeing stuff. He's looking for this thing to happen. That tells me that that's what I need to do. I'm looking for this thing to happen, and I want to go and do that. And the idea is they're going through, and he's looking up, and he sees this, and he says, well, I don't want to go live there. I want to live in Zoar. Then he says, well, I'm done with this. And the fact that he goes up and he dwells in a cave in the mountains. I mean, you take a look at that, huh? It's almost like he's hiding up there. Because he's worried about something in the mountain, right? If I go and if I have to go to the mountain, at least I'm going to go hide in the cave where I can't be found. Whatever it may be, he knows something in the mountain. I don't think we can say that he knew what was going to happen, because there were a lot of the things that would have said that God gave him information when God wasn't even dealing with Lot. Right? He was dealing with Abraham at the time, and Lot makes really, really bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. Even when he thinks it's a good decision, it's a bad decision, right? Because the way he thinks and the way he goes about things are not good. So next time what I want to do is I do want to get into the Moabites, which is a really interesting thing, and the children of Ammon as well, all right? Next time.
Enemies against the children of Israel later.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, none of it's good, but there's some really interesting things that takes place, and it should kind of make sense that out of what took place here, what was produced is the exact opposite of what God is wanting, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll take a look at those next time, all right? So, good stuff. Lot's bad. His wife also made bad choices. His daughters made bad choices.
What did she mean?
It would have been better if he'd have just stayed. Do what?
What did she mean when she said there's not a man in the earth to come in unto us? Did she think everybody was destroyed?
Perhaps because everybody around him except Zoar was destroyed.
She knew Abraham.
She would have known him, but they're up in a mountain. Who's in the mountain? Just those three. But it's a daughter of Lot, right? It's a daughter of Lot. She's like,
She comes from a bad seed, right?
yeah, she's got a bad. Like you're like you could look at this and say, man, this is a TV show right here, Queens of the Mountain. Well, so that the nation of Israel would learn from it, and then we would be able to learn from it as well. Quit making bad decisions. That's what we should learn. Even when you think it's a good decision, if it's not coming from what God said, don't do it. Right? So when you take a look at that, every decision that he makes is a fleshly, I see stuff, vision, way of living life and making decisions. So, and of course, like I said, what comes about from them is Moab and Ammon. So we'll talk about them next week. But we'll get back into chapter 20 after we do that. So, good time.